All right, listen up, Rotogrinders. It's the ownership report here at rotogrinders.com. My name is Christopher Gimino, projected ownership analyst for NFL DFS, and joining me to go over all of the Week 18 action in the NFL landscape is Mr. Tuttle 05, Dan Gaspar. Tuttle, it could be a record-breaking week. Are you ready for all the records to get broken? All I hear all week is about records, and I have an interesting take on this. Let's hear how you feel about the record-breaking weeks.
Yeah, I mean, based on your what we talked about pre-show, you didn't give me too big of a hint, but I'm guessing you're going against the grain and thinking that records are meaningless.
Oh, Tuttle, no, they're maybe they're meaningful in like why are people chasing records in week 18? It used to be a 17-week season, Tuttle. Like people are talking about records like, oh my God, they're gonna break the franchise record for this, or Cooper Kupp could break the all-time. It doesn't matter. It's an extra game. Like what the hell are we
You're gonna get
talking
the
about?
asterisk.
Right. Like, I mean, I can't even believe no one's mentioned. I mean, are people mentioning this or what? Am I the only one? Am I crazy?
No, I mean, I see a lot of record talk, not a whole lot of asterisk talk.
Yeah, let's put the asterisk on some of these records because you got to do it in on a per game basis, or at least in the 17-week sample that we come to expect now. But now that my tilt is nice and firmly squeezed out to start this show, I think what we really need to start talking about is this untraditionally sane week 18, or what used to be the week 17 slate. There's not a ton of crazy value that's come up yet, although it's still Saturday and we could still get some news coming out here. But where are the preseason guys I spent so much time researching to start the season? Why aren't they appearing in my lineup HQ as good values?
Yeah, don't you get who's that Philadelphia tight end? Is he finally playing today?
Tyree Jackson. Yeah, that didn't
Tyree
really work
Jackson,
out.
is that a thing?
I mean, look, it was supposed to be. We'll see. But if Goddard takes the seat tonight, maybe we'll see that. But he's not even on the slate, so we got nothing. We got no Gainwell. We got no Tyree Jackson. Yeah, we're talking about actually good NFL players today, Tuttle. So let's start at the quarterback position where salary's tight on DraftKings, but if you had the money to spend, I think you probably lean in the direction of Kyler Murray or Josh Allen, right? Like there's nobody else on the slate that even comes close to having something to play for and the quality of quarterback play that you'll get from those guys, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think Kyler will be interesting because the Cardinals have not been playing all that well, but he also has kind of shown you why he's such a good fantasy quarterback, because even floor games for him are some of the ceilings from some of these other dusty quarterbacks. You're looking, I think he's 21 or more DK points through of the last 4 games, and you would consider all those games disappointing for him. But yeah, he kind of shows he hasn't really flashed the ceiling, but he's been rushing a lot more lately too, especially over the last 2 games. So I like Kyler quite a bit, but agree he's going to be chalk. And then same with Josh Allen, similar story with Allen as well.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Kyler is while he's pretty expensive, the pairing options aren't all that expensive, and I don't genuinely see a lot of guys to get excited about when it comes to, if you're playing a tournament, usually you're going to stack 1 or 2 guys with your quarterback. And, Josh Allen's 8,100, but his guys are, outside of Diggs, or, you could at least make a team there. Huntley, I mean, you tell me, are you going to pay up for Mark Andrews this week at the tight end position? I mean, it starts to get tough to stack some of these guys, and we'll talk about some of the guys that seem to fit the bill pretty good as stacking candidates. But I'm at least on paper, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't really see like the super chalk stack other than Kyler right now.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I do think maybe we'll see Stafford ownership drive up a little bit, just because the stacking partners are easier. Kupp's going to be heavily owned. There's your record guy you're talking about, Cooper Kupp. But I do think you'll see Stafford because of that.
Ryan Tannehill maybe, because you got AJ Brown to pair him with, but you don't really have much else to go along with Tannehill here. So it is a situation though where he's only 6K and AJ Brown's only 7K on DraftKings, and certainly if you wanted to make the case on FanDuel, you could go to these guys too. But I mean, I think the matchup with the Texan will probably drive some ownership towards him. That's the way we're projecting it right now.
Yeah, I could see. I don't know. People don't love playing Tannehill though. But you kind of mentioned it. After this, it gets pretty ugly in terms of just like who you're going to stack. I think recency bias plus price plus matchup. I don't even want to say this, but I think Russell Wilson gets over 5%.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like, I mean, why not? Like, we're just if you're looking at the layout of how things are looking here, even if you just sort by projected ownership currently, like it drops off big time after Murray and Josh Allen, which we said. So I do think, like, yeah, we'll see Wilson probably 5% plus with DK Metcalf and whatnot.
What if I told you he won Osimo $1 million with 29 pass attempts? Like, I mean, it's like,
Yep.
like how good does this guy have to run? Like, I don't think anything's really all that different with Russell Wilson here. I guess maybe the field might, but and it's a tough week, like you said. So maybe there's some merit to getting that ownership up a little bit into projections. Now we have Trey Lance in here. I don't know if that's going to be the case. I actually think it's probably going to be Garoppolo, but Kyle Shanahan's playing coy. At any rate, do you think that Garoppolo would get anything close to 5% if it was him in this projection instead of Trey Lance?
No, not
Yeah.
at all.
I mean, he's got something to play for, and I think that's something to look for as far as where guys might gravitate towards. But I guess I agree with you that the field is just not that interested in playing Jimmy Garoppolo on most weeks, and why would this week be different? So where's the ownership going? Is it to Davis Mills at 5,300 total? Can you play Davis Mills?
You can. I'm sure people will pair him with Brandon Cooks. Like Brady technically has something to play for. Like I think Brady rates very clearly below the other spend up options that we've mentioned, but you might see people throw some Brady Evans, Brady Gronk stacks in there, just because he does technically have at least something small to play for. So yeah, I think you'll probably see some ownership steam on Brady.
We don't have it that way, right? We don't have it. We don't have it that way right now because maybe I'm crazy. I don't think that guy's playing very far into the second half. I assume he'll play to halftime. But I mean, Bruce Arians can say whatever he wants. Like they don't really have that much to play for here. Like I would just be stunned to see him playing in the fourth quarter. But again, it's not impossible. And I don't know if people are going to have that confidence. I'm looking for people will have confidence that the guy's going to play the whole game before they actually click on a guy in DFS. That just seems to make the most sense. Tyler Huntley is a guy that seems to make a lot of sense because he's 5.7. You don't necessarily need a stacking partner, and he's got the rushing capability. So I think he'll be owned a little bit. And you can say the same for Taysom Hill. Am I wrong? These guys are going to get owned.
No, you're not wrong. I was sour on Huntley last week against the Rams. I think it's a little bit better of a spot. Like it's another spot where I'm kind of okay not playing him if he's projected to come in as the third highest quarterback, which I don't necessarily think's wrong. You kind of alluded to it though. It's tough. All Huntley stacks are going to go through Mark Andrews. It's Mark Andrews is the guy that he throws the ball to. Marquise Brown is just apparently absolutely total dust now. So if you're looking to get different, maybe you throw some Marquise Brown stacks in there. But yeah, it's pretty ugly.
I actually think if you're playing on FanDuel, maybe you might see more Mark Andrews, but on DraftKings, it's so tight that, Marquise Brown's just 5,900 and, you got to, I guess some nutcases will probably stack Bateman or whoever on the Ravens, and you'll start to see some different looking stacks on DraftKings for Huntley, but he's also a guy that you don't necessarily need to stack. And Taysom, I don't, the reason Taysom might actually get some steam here is because, you got Deontay Harris and Marquez Callaway as inexpensive options. If you do choose to stack with Taysom, the pricing is not prohibitive.
Yeah. And Callaway's actually been pretty decent lately too. I mean, that his stacks are a little bit more appealing to me. I mean, overall, an unexciting week at the quarterback position, but yeah, I think I would definitely lean to playing Taysom naked as opposed to stacking him, but I don't mind Callaway.
Yeah. Some pretty gross options at the bottom here. I mean, God, I don't even want to say some of the names I thought about when I was looking at the low owned guys, but I guess we will say them later. But it's not pretty. The week in general is just not very pretty. Maybe we'll get lucky and get some value coming out before the end of the day or before, in the midnight news dump or something like that, that'll really turn the slate around at the quarterback position. But there is certainly not a lot to just get overly thrilled about with the matchups and the situations. Now at running back, Tuttle, if you are in New York, it's here. Saturday, January the 8th has come. And you can get all the information you need on live sports betting from Rotogrinders and Scores and Odds. Folks, if you are on rotogrinders.com now, go ahead and get to the sports betting tab and start clicking about the New York and get all the information on promo codes and signups and really get yourself into the action. And again, this is specifically for New York residents, but you guys have waited way too long to get involved in this sports betting gold. And RG's got the stuff. Get to the website, click the sports betting tab, get some promo codes, and start betting. Okay, Tuttle. Running backs that you might want to play in New York. Maybe on the over side of things, depending on the line that they're going to give you. Certainly, Jonathan Taylor is going to present you a lot of upside on the rushing yards any given week. And the matchup this week is with Jacksonville. Problem is, he's 9.3. You can't afford nice things and have everything you want. You're going to have to decide probably between him and Cooper Kupp if you're making a more optimal lineup. Do you think that it's correct that he's not going to be the highest on running back, even though he probably should be?
Yes, I agree with that. Again, it's more of a pricing thing than anything else. Maybe you'll see him creep up. I think probably just below James Conner. I could see him being like a top 2, but again, a lot of that just has to do pricing, which is it's hard for us to do manually, which is why you have it all automated.
Yeah, we're waiting for that value, right? But once we get that
Yep.
couple of value picks, we'll see Jonathan Taylor shoot right up this ownership percentage, and he'll get up towards the top. And this whole conversation we moot as far as whether or not he should be in the mid range of ownership. But again, we need the value, and that's what it's going to take to get there with Jonathan Taylor. Right now, favoring Cooper Kupp because of positional. Now,
how weird is it that we don't have value on week 18?
That's what I started the show talking about. Is that we're just so used to having 3K, 4K guys at different positions that are just not used to playing. Maybe we'll talk about the Packers wide receivers, right? Like maybe if you don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to play a lot, there's some guys there that you can use. But at the same time, the ownership's not going to be there until you get some clarity on the situation. So we're looking at Jonathan Taylor at the moment, just a little bit light on the ownership side. Maybe it'll creep up if we get value. Now, the value currently, Keyshawn Vaughn, 5.3. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, almost for sure going to play a lot in this game. You not expecting anything to come out into his way in terms of his reps here. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Do you see Vaughn as a chalky option?
It makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And we're talking value here. He's a guy that, like, not typically, the low cost value that we like to see below that 5K range on DraftKings, but he's 5'3". He's probably like the cheapest realistic that you can go, right there with Samaje Perine. I mean, we might get some news. Maybe we can play like Patrick Taylor or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the way it sets up right now, Michael Carter, I guess, would be another guy, but like this 5 to 5'3" range is about the cheapest you can reasonably go and expect some sort of decent workload out of. So yeah, I think because of that, Keyshawn Vaughn's value or ownership will kind of be where you have him pegged. And people love, the heavy team total for the Buccaneers. They're, almost double digit favorites. So everything's kind of shaping out for him to get some ownership. Yeah.
Am I living in a preseason bubble when I don't have Samaje Perine anywhere near chalky because I'm afraid of Chris Evans, like getting a bunch of run in this game? Like, I mean, Perine's playing with the first team offense as the third down back these days. I mean, do they really want to get him out there with Brandon Allen? I mean, I don't know. I could see Chris Evans getting a lot of run. I mean, he might even be a sneaky play if it turns out you want to get so bold as to make a step out on a limb. He's a pass catching guy. He could do it on DraftKings for sure. But just with regards to Perine, I don't have a ton of ownership on him. Should I have more?
I'm hoping our thinking is advanced and we're the sharp ones here, because I kind of had the same thought as you. But I do think he'll get ownership. Like, people just see, hey, Joe Mixon's out, the first team's offense is out. I don't think you should just jump to thinking Perine's going to be the bell cow now. Like, I'm sure there are stats going out that, when Joe Mixon's been out the last blah, 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 this is how Samaje Perine has done. But I mean, you mentioned it, it's a completely different situation. Samaje Perine is valuable to this team. If they're resting all the first team offense, why is Perine out there, handling 30 carries or something crazy like that? That's not going to happen. So I'm in agreement with you. I do think the general public might not view it that way. And so you'll see his ownership creep up into the double digits or even kind of like in the teens there. But again, that makes it tough. Then where do you go? Like Chris Evans, you kind of mentioned, is more of a pass catching back. Like is Travion Williams the guy that's going to come in and steal the show? I wouldn't be all that surprised, but you can't really, like, that's a play that's so low probability. It's very hard to pull the trigger on.
their offense is going to stink anyway with Brandon Allen.
Yep.
What are you talking about the Bengals for? James Connors, we glossed over him briefly. No Chase Edmonds. He's going to be chalky against the Seahawks, and so go ahead and get him in there if you can. I don't see any particular reason other than the questionable tag. We'll have to see about the injury status as far as a reason to veer away from him. Of course, if he's out, Benjamin, Jonathan Ward on the table as far as consideration. Sonny Michel, 6K. We got Akers back here, but he's not playing. He's coming off like a serious injury. He's not playing a bunch in this game. It's going to be Michel again. The matchup's fine. What do you think about Michel here at 6K?
See, the biggest issue here is literally any other touch that goes to a running back will be a lower share than what Sony Michel saw last week, which is why we loved Sony Michel last week, because we kind of thought he was going to get close to 100% of the running back touches, and he did get 100% of the running back touches. So even if you think Akers comes back and doesn't see like a huge role, what's not a huge role, like 20% of running back touches? And even if that happens, Michel loses some of his shine. So I think it's an interesting spot to I'm more interested to see where the field comes in on him. He's a guy that I'll probably come in underweight if this is the ownership projection on him. Because I guess I am a little bit more worried about Akers. I'd love some clarity there. Not that we're going to get any sort of clarity around the situation. But I do think there's just enough there that, again, even 20% of the touches, that's enough to siphon some of this value off of Michel.
Let me ask you a question. If it's pass interference in the end zone and the ball's on the 1 yard line, who do you think gets the first carry at the goal this week?
I honestly don't know. And that's why I would come in underweight on Michel, because I don't know. I don't think they like Michel. I think they actually do like Cam Akers. So it's just a matter of how you view the injury. And I legitimately don't know how to view the injury, to be honest. I know we should, it's an improbable comeback, and it's crazy that he's, even considering playing this week, but I don't know.
It is what it is. We're dealing with the situation. Currently projecting Michel to get the bulk of the work, because I think that's what you do when you look at the injury that Akers had. You just shouldn't expect this team to run it. I mean, you expect this to be a welcome back. Here's a couple of snaps to remind you that you're an NFL football player. Maybe get smashed once or twice, but the end of the day, I still expecting Michel to get the bulk of the work. So I think he's a fine play, especially if the ownership gets spread out the way it's currently projected. Do you remember when Donta Foreman was useless and out of the league? He's back. He's out there probably one last time until Derrick Henry comes back. He's 5.7 against the Houston Texans. So I imagine if we're expecting Tennessee to play all out in this game, that people are going to want to roster him. Do you want to roster him?
I mean, it's the matchup for it, right? Yeah, I think he's a good play. I think the touch count's going to be there for him. Do you remember when this was like a 3-back committee? And really that's not the case anymore with Dontre Hilliard, Jeremy McNichols, Foreman's they're all still in the picture, but Foreman's still going to get ideal script here. He's going to get 20 plus touches. I'm all for that for sure.
I think you would see more ownership on David Montgomery were it not for a fairly tight week, and he's 6.8 with lots of similar looking options to me in the surrounding area. Certainly not from a raw perspective, but from a points per dollar perspective, Singletary, Foreman, Michel, Vaughn, Connor, all those guys are in the same ballpark generally. Rashad Penny, 6.5. I mean, he gets a little bit of the recency bias boost compared to where he's at right now, but I still think there's a big crowd in that price range. Eli Mitchell, of course, you could go to for San Francisco. Just a lot of guys that are going to eat up ownership in the mid-tier. And that should pretty much tell you how the chalk roster build is going to go until we get some value. You're not going to see a ton of stars and scrub. You're going to be able to get 1 star, not stars and scrubs. So that's a situation where you're going to see a lot of these 6K area guys, and probably some under ownership on guys like Dalvin Cook at 7.8, right?
Yeah, I think Dalvin Cook is, going to be completely overlooked here. What do we even have as ownership projected?
He's at 12% right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a very strong, it sounds like Minnesota's going to go all out. They don't really have anything to play for, but it sounds like their guys are going to get all the snaps. I think he's a very strong play. I did want to make a comment. First of all, what in the world happened to Michael Carter last week?
Well, he's a New York Jet, Tuttle. So, I mean, what do you want me to say here? I mean, first of all, the matchup with the Buccaneers isn't exactly ideal for the running back.
But
right?
Austin Walter got all the work. Like what am I looking at here? What in what world and why? Like I have him projecting well myself. But like what? Why did Austin Walter get the 14 touches or 14 carries to Michael Carter's 3?
Are you
Did I miss
trying to get
something?
excited about Michael Carter this week? I mean, he's 5K. If you believe the projection, he's a decent play. He's facing Buffalo, not a great matchup, but better than Tampa Bay last week. So, I mean, if you're desperate for the salaries,
Carter got a concussion last week, which I missed. I finally just read that up. That makes a lot
I didn't
more
catch
sense.
that either. That's good to know, actually. Certainly our projections team didn't seem to think too much of the usage, so they must have saw that, and that's the reason why we've got him up here with maybe closer to 10% ownership. Now we also have Ramondre Stevenson closer to 10% owned. I think that is leaning in the direction of Damian Harris not going to play here, and if that is actually true, I think this number goes up from 9.2%, and if it doesn't go up from 9.2%, sign me up for whatever the maximum amount of Ramondre Stevenson is, because this guy is absolutely awesome. I love him.
I like Ramondre too. What are the latest reports on Damian? Do we have anything today?
Well, really the nagging, I think it's a hamstring injury that he's dealing with, and it's been pretty ongoing. So if they don't think they absolutely need him to win this game, which I guess that remains to be seen whether or not they would actually make decisions in that particular way. Like I'm sure if he can go, he'll go, but Stevenson is certainly going to get more than his fair share of the work regardless. And he's got the upside to just take, especially if Harris isn't ruled out at all and he just starts the game. Like Stevenson could just literally just start taking the ball in the second quarter and just run the rest of the game. And I think you definitely want that. I think New England's good. I thought they were good since the start of the season. I bet them to make the playoffs, got paid off on that. Like, I think it's a situation where, like, this is a team that is built for him. Like, the way that he plays and the way that and plus he can catch passes if they absolutely need him to, too. So, for me, I just think Stevenson in the spot against Miami is among the more overlooked options because you won't see his projection rise up to the level of those other guys. But I think he's got that kind of upside.
So you want Harris to be active then, right? Like if you're really hardcore on Ramondre Stevenson, regardless, almost regardless, I should say, of the situation, you want Harris active, I think.
It would be harder for me to click the button, but I certainly would say that it's better for a game theory angle. Like the game theory, the ownership won't go up anywhere near as high without that particular projection getting updated. And you really just have to just sort of use your imagination on him. Like you might have to do that a couple of times this week. And we'll talk about some of those situations at the wide receiver position. You don't have to use your imagination in this way for Najee Harris. He and Alvin Kamara are both going to be highly priced guys, overlooked on the ownership scale because of the tight pricing on DraftKings. I even think on FanDuel, you might not see just gourds of ownership on either one of these guys. So you tell me, are these guys good tournament plays because of their massive upside? Oh my God, $23 on Yahoo for Najee. Jeez.
Yeah. Najee's really randomly cheap over there. So Kamara, it's all dependent on Mark Ingram for me, who's I think questionable still. We'll see, but amazingly, Mark Ingram's status still matters in the year 2022 because he really Kamara really does go from essentially like a 60-40 split to a 90-10 split if Mark Ingram's out. And so kind of surprisingly, that goes overlooked on a weekly basis. Like Kamara was still extremely low owned last week. Granted, we had better options. He kind of got there thanks to his receiving work last week. But I was pretty heavy on Kamara last week. Matchups even better. If Ingram's out, I love Kamara for sure, especially if he's going to come in under 10% owned, which I kind of do think he will.
Here's the deal. If you're priced between like 5,000 and 7,000, you're going to get a pretty good amount of ownership if you have a good projection on DraftKings this week. We've outlined a number of those players. If your projection is, if your price is over 7,000, if your name is not Jonathan Taylor, your ownership could be depressed a little bit. So keep that in mind as you construct your rosters. Heading over to the wide receiver position, it's a place where I mention it week in and week out. If you are not looking to, research some of the deeper options that you're going to have to look at, like the Green Bay wide receivers. If you don't know what Equanimeous St. Brown is, other than a great play on a Scrabble board, then you could absolutely be going to Thrive Fantasy and playing their props contest because it's only going to be the best players when you play on Thrive Fantasy. first of all, what is it? It's prop betting DFS. So you choose 10 out of 20 guys to build a lineup, so to speak, of props. It's an over and an under. So each one is assigned a probability and a value based on how likely it is to hit the most props, rack up the most points, win your share of the prize pool. Use promo code Grinders when you head over there and sign up, and you'll receive 100% instant first match deposit bonus up to $250. Plus, you get some free tickets. You get 2 for a $10 deposit. You get 4 for over 100 and up to 500. And if you deposit $500, you're going to get 6 tickets. Download the Thrive Fantasy app on the App Store or the Play Store, or by visiting their website, thrivefantasy.com. Sign up and prop up today. And like I said, over on that site, you will see guys like Cooper Kupp, who is going to be fairly owned yet again, despite the 9.7 price tag, chasing quote unquote records. But more importantly, they do have to win this football game. I think that's the more relevant reason to consider rostering him this week. How do you feel about Kupp at 9.7? Can you possibly afford him?
Yeah, you can. I mean, again, value's tough. You're not currently fitting Kupp and Jonathan Taylor on the same lineup. That's not going to happen. But you can realistically pick one of them. Value is so clearly better at the running back position than it is at the wide receiver position, which has me at this point prioritizing Kupp over Jonathan Taylor. That could change if we get some breaking news. But yeah, you can afford Kupp. I mean, we talk about the record thing kind of jokingly on top of the show, but how crazy is it that we think of a guy that needs 12 receptions to break the single season reception record, and it's not crazy to think that's like force feeding Cooper Kupp the ball. Like that's a normal game for him. So that's another thing that, some of these records are just not obtainable, but when you see like Cooper Kupp is 120 or it's 12 and 136 or something like that, that's a Sunday for him. And if he's close at all, we know they actually are. Like they're very cognizant of this specific record, these specific records with Kupp. So I don't know. I think his floor obviously is great regardless, but you throw in the records chasing stuff for him. I like him a lot.
First of all, you want to talk about something I talked about at the beginning of the show. Just imagine that he's chasing a record that got set in 17 weeks. And it was from Michael Thomas. Shout out to Can't Guard Mike for not getting surgery in the offseason and completely missing all the fun this year as Marquez Callaway completely bores us to tears over there in New Orleans as the number 1. You've got Cooper Kupp chasing you down, although he needs 18 weeks to do it. Anyway, and that's crazy. You think about what kind of season Kupp's got, like what a season Mike Thomas had the other year. But I digress. We're playing Cooper Kupp if we can afford it. If we can't afford it, what are we doing? Is it AJ Brown? Is it Justin Jefferson? Where are you going to put your money?
It's where it's tough. I think it's AJ Brown. You really have to buy in. I'm having trouble with it with this Minnesota team in general. Like you really have to buy in that they're just going to go out there and play for pride, basically, because these price tags, 8,100 for Jefferson, Dalvin Cook was even pretty pricey. You really have to buy in and hope they're going to play 100% all game. And really give it their all. So I like any time that I can side with a team that just definitely has, the motivation there, I'll side with that. So like AJ Brown for me, I think Justin Jefferson theoretically is a great play, but again, you have to take a little bit, at least a leap of faith, just to hope that he's in the game for all 4 quarters.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of person Kirk Cousins is, but he wasn't a vaccinated guy when he missed last week. I don't know if he's going to come out here charging with something to prove here or whatever, but certainly they have a narrative for Dalvin Cook to do some stuff. Hashtag for his dad. That was it wasn't a hashtag, whatever. He's out there playing for his dad. I'll put it to you that way. And Justin Jefferson, if he's not getting the touchdowns, is he going to get the 10, 11 receptions he would need to get the job done in that particular scenario where he's not scoring? I'm not against playing Justin Jefferson. I'm just pointing out that there's some kind of a Dalvin Cook narrative out there that maybe he could be force-fed a couple of extra touches near the goal. On the mid-range side of things, like let's say, you're paying up for Jonathan Taylor. Maybe you have to go more towards the mid-range. I think that's where you're going to see Christian Kirk start to get some ownership paired with Kyler, certainly, but also in a lot of other lineups he's going to fit with this mid-range price tag. And some of the other guys that fit this mold, DJ Moore, Brandon Cooks, Marquise Brown, and to a lesser extent, Waddle and Michael Pittman Jr. Is there another mid-range guy that I'm missing here that should be creeping up in ownership?
Mid-range, not really. And I mean, honestly, this is why we're prioritizing Cooper Kupp. Things drop off so fast at the wide receiver position this week. Again, at least as it stands on Saturday. It just drops off so fast. I mean, we didn't talk about Stephon Diggs, who I like a lot, but he's definitely not a mid-tiered guy. He's more of the upper tier pricing. But I do like him a lot. Although he is, I think, fairly cheap on FanDuel. I want to say he's in the 7,700.
Yeah, he's always cheap there.
Yeah, so he'll get more ownership there. But no, I mean, you mentioned like it's so ugly. Jalen Waddle against a team that just is really good at limiting the opponent's opportunities, and there's not a lot of ways to go. Like Chase Claypool, I have value tags this week on DraftKings, and I'm struggling to find somebody, and I'm hoping we get something pop up value wise on DraftKings for receivers, but there's not a lot out there.
I'm like basically guessing that we're getting news on Green Bay of some kind when I have Equinemius St. Brown with like something, creeping up the ownership scale here because he's 3K and he's the most known name of these Green Bay wide receivers. I also happen to think that, Amari Rodgers could actually be the guy that gets more of the looks than Equinemius St. Brown in this situation if they really want to try to develop that young player. But, that's not to say ESB is not going to be an option on the cheap side of things, but we just need some sort of announcement or clarity of how much the starters are going to play. Right now, they're still going with the line of bullshit that these guys are playing. The starters are playing, Tuttle. I'll believe it when I see it. I digress, though. There's no, Marvin Jones Jr. I think he's got some kind of incentive he's chasing out there at 4.3. Maybe you could go with him, but he's also a Jacksonville Jaguar, and they stink. So, I mean, I don't care how many catches he needs. Like, he's no lock to get one.
Yeah, he's bad. 4K Allen Robinson. Like this is a week where you legitimately look at Allen Robinson and like, can I do it? You don't want to, but he's popping up at 4K. Robbie Anderson, 4,500. Like I do think looking through, I think Gabe Davis is interesting in this price range. I could see him get some ownership. Emmanuel Sanders, I believe, is still doubtful to play this week.
Cole Beasley's in that same conversation at 4.8. I mean, he's not traditionally seen as a particularly high ceiling option, and I think that's for good reason. But if in fact the Bills are going to attack the Jets through the air, which you might expect, I think Beasley could be in the cards for 4, 5, 6 receptions, and if he gets a touchdown, he could get there on a week without a ton of value. So moral of the story, ownership again. Congregating a little bit more towards the high side of things because we had to, we're paying down elsewhere, and you're getting Kupp, Brown, Jefferson, at least one of those guys in a lot of different lineups out there, and then some middle tier guys, of course, because there's really no low priced options to speak of at the moment. We're throwing out names from a hat here with Equinemius St. Brown and Marvin Jones, or like maybe Deontay Harris. He's only 3.2 if you're pairing Taysom. God, people are going to talk about Antoine Wesley. He's 4.1 because he's going to fit there nicely with Kyler. He's
caught all 3 of Kyler's touchdowns over the last 2 weeks.
Not a lot of great. He's tall. Not a lot of great.
I honestly, I mistake him for a tight end every single time. He has the oddly similar build to Zach Ertz, and I can't distinguish the two half the time when they line up.
When my commentary on you is about your height, that's just proof that. Maybe you're not the superior of options in NFL DFS for the long term. For the short term, maybe you can consider it because we're not rich on value. What am I missing here at wide receiver? Is there any analysis we can provide the people roster construction wise or ownership wise? Because it's getting pretty spread out because of the pricing structure, and there's just not a lot of standout plays.
No, I don't think there's a ton to add. I will say, because since we've talked about the Green Bay guys a couple times, or potential Green Bay value guys, I think it's important to remember it's going to be Jordan Love throwing them the ball if they become an option.
Very true.
Which when we saw that earlier this year, it was not pretty at all. So that would be my only thing is like perhaps value opens up. And we talked a little bit about it with Cincinnati's second string offense too. be sure you're docking efficiency. Like this isn't basketball, where just because a guy gets on the court for 30 minutes, he's going to see a tremendous amount of opportunity. That's not necessarily the case with the NFL here. So yeah, dock efficiency when necessary this week.
Very, very gross. Not nearly as gross as the DFS OGs league title. If you want to go get into this last week and hang out with those dudes, get to the RG homepage, click on the link, sign up to play against Notorious Head Chopper Beer Makers fan. Bunch of good dudes, good contest. Get over there and play on FanDuel with them. Okay, tight end position. Zach Ertz, Cole Kmet, John Bates. John Bates. They're popping up as the top 3 guys. Is this right? Why is John Bates in my life?
I mean, Ricky Seals-Jones collided with a camera dude last week. That was one of the worst collisions I've seen with on-field personnel. That was actually pretty ugly. Hopefully, both guys are doing a little bit better than what we saw last week. But yeah, I mean, John Bates has shown he's capable when he's been given opportunity, which is basically, I guess, why you're seeing him predicted for decent ownership on DraftKings. Cheap. We love the cheap tight end. Allows you to go elsewhere, spend elsewhere. We've already mentioned lack of value at other positions. So, I mean, that's why you're seeing Cole Kmet and John Bates pop. It's just overall lack of value at the other positions.
Now, if you don't know John Bates, if you're not watching the screen share, Tuttle, you can see this clear as day, of course, because you are watching the screen share. He was actually the older brother in Home Alone. This is Buzz from Home Alone, John Bates here. So go. He's
Buzz
cheap.
With the tarantula.
Yeah, he's cheap in DFS. He's not too fond of his little brother Kevin, but you can probably get him in there against the Giants if you're looking for a really cheap value. But you're not going to love it because what is there to love on the cheap scale? Cole Kmet. Now, he's definitely been getting a lot of targets out there, and for 3.4, his price refuses to go up because he's not getting in the end zone. He's not really getting the big fantasy point performances. Andy Dalton's his quarterback this week, but these Minnesota games just tend, especially when Cousins is in there, they tend to find a way. So can you find some love for Cole Kmet?
Yeah, I can. That wasn't like this is, I think, one of the better games to stack, which is a little crazy this week. We talked about Minnesota. Well, both these teams obviously don't have anything to play for. The thing is, there's actually some pretty bad weather, I think, around this weekend. You have to check up our weather report. There are a lot of weather spots. So that immediately is going to throw me to games that are in domes. Chicago and Minnesota happens to be one of those games. Cole Kmet, cheap, going to get targets. Like, I'm going to say it now because I'm just leading into it. This is kind of one of my low own takes, but like an Andy Dalton stack might win tournaments this week, just because it's so cheap. Like an Andy Dalton, Cole Kmet stack, he gets you 2 touchdowns. That might be all you need out of Andy Dalton and Cole Kmet, just so it allows you to basically then play, like a Jonathan Taylor and a Cooper Kupp. It allows you to jam everything if you do that. So it sounds ugly, but I would not be surprised if a really ugly Chicago stack won tournaments this weekend.
A player that, well, first of all, a couple of I'm going to say reasonably priced tight ends, not great price. Higbee and Gerald Everett could get the job done here. They're going to probably attract some ownership unless we get some kind of a value opening up here. Gronkowski's difficult to afford at 6.3. I think you'd like to have him. There's some reasons to believe that he'll get some action in this game for contract purposes. And I think that that's a situation that you would ideally like to get yourself involved with, except for it's 6.3 and you can't afford nice things on DraftKings. If you're looking to pay down, a guy that I would really like to get more snaps, and I would love to roster is Brevin Jordan, but the problem is he's not a full-time player at the moment. He's still only 2.7 though, and they do like him in the red zone, so I'm still not against this. But again, it's a difficult sell to get like totally endorsed on a guy like Jordan when he's not. He really has basically almost no chance of like a high target volume game. Brock Wright at 2.5, he's a Detroit Lion. If you've never heard of him. God, 2.5. Maybe that's the reason to roster him, but it's projected for 5 fantasy points because he's a Detroit Lion. So go figure. How about Mo Alley Cox? I mean, maybe you'd like him if they were going to pass it. Do you think there's any chance that the script flips on him?
I mean, maybe. And then you're looking at decent leverage off of Taylor because if you're getting Mo Alley, then you're wanting the touchdowns. You're probably not going to get the yardage. So like Maybe. maybe you can do that, but it's not pretty.
You mentioned Mark Andrews is really expensive. George Kittle's quite expensive. With Garoppolo at quarterback, certainly you like him better than with Lance. You don't expect that against the Rams that it's just going to be the same game plan as last week, where they're just going to, they were just going to cram it down Houston's throat with the run game, and Kittle's going to be out there blocking. All of a sudden now you're talking about playing the Rams, and he might be out there catching passes again if Garoppolo's back there, especially. So I mean, God, maybe this is my low owned take. Maybe it's Kittle, right? Because he's not going to get that owned, is he?
Yeah, so that's the news. We talked about still not wanting to play Jimmy Garoppolo even if he's starter. But this is the play that you make, right? You play George Kittle, and you can do that in hopes that Garoppolo starts, because I don't think we'll know starter before the lineup's locked tomorrow at noon. I think Shanahan will play it close to the vest until the start of the game. So if you think Jimmy G starts, and I do think Jimmy G starts, this is your play: is you play George Kittle.
He's very nice, 6.9 on FanDuel. So if you're playing on FanDuel, you're going to see considerable amount more George Kittle there. I think that you could probably get there easier on that site. Okay, so that wraps up this tremendously terrible tight end position. It's really a terrible week, to be honest with you, Tuttle. And God, don't even get me started on tonight's 2-game slate. This is recording this on a Saturday. I mean, that's even worse. So it's just like, it's on paper not shaping up to be one of the greatest DFS slates of all time, especially not for weeks 17/18. Now, there is finally a position, though, Tuttle, the defense position, where we have an obvious play, something that we can actually get excited about. The Cleveland Browns are 2.6 on a cash-starved week on DraftKings. I think that this doesn't really merit a lot of discussion. We're just going to go ahead and play them against Brandon Allen, right?
100%. Again, though, I mean, you can definitely make the point or the argument and probably be correct that it's bad to eat chalk in tournaments. I'll still have exposure to the Browns in tournaments for sure, especially higher stakes, lower field type of things. But yeah, I mean, it's an obviously they're just very easily the cash game play on DK.
Other more reasonably priced defenses you might see in the mix: the Cardinals 2.7, the Vikings 2.9, the Washington football team is 3.1 against just an army. They have a never-ending trail of terrible quarterback teams. Okay, it's 2, but it's Glennon and Fromm that are back there lately for the Giants. So you as bad as the Washington football team has played this year on defense, maybe they have one actually good week on deck. The Lions are 2.4 against possibly Jordan Love, so maybe that's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Well, they're 2.4.
Yeah. I mean, I do think though, I do think if you're just trying to get different, I think it's a pay up to get different week. Because I do think there are some decent higher price defenses that are just not going to get the ownership because Browns defense is so good, and because lineup construction just makes it difficult. But even something like the Titans defense against the Texans, do the Titans Dante Foreman stack if you really want to. Something like that, I think is enough to get a little bit different.
Some defenses we like from a raw points perspective: Buffalo against the Jets, the Buccaneers against Carolina, both exceptionally expensive and difficult to play on DraftKings. Maybe you can get there on some other sites a little bit easier. I mean, I guess you can like the Colts here against Jacksonville because they stink. And then the Patriots at 3. I mean, just in general, I don't have any confidence in what Tua is doing out there in Miami. So if they get behind, you could definitely look for the Patriots to potentially start racking up some fantasy points in that contest. Okay, Tuttle, you've waited the entire show to uncork what is maybe your worst take of the entire year from an excitement level perspective, but you teased it earlier at the quarterback position. Give me the guy that you think, if you're playing in a larger field contest, that can actually help you get to the top of a tournament at lower ownership. You don't have to get an entire lineup of low owned guys to get to the top of these tournaments these days, most of the time. But maybe a couple of options or a couple of unique angles can get you there. And it sounded like you have a pretty gross one that you want to talk about.
Well, I did there's a couple. The one that I did mention, and you didn't have like an adverse reaction, was Andy Dalton.
No, not really. I mean, it's pretty gross, but I'm making fun of Andy Dalton essentially here, but it makes sense. The pricing's there, and the Minnesota has given it up.
Yeah. And I mean, you're trying to, again, try to remember what you're trying to do here. You're trying to get 20 points out of Dalton. We're not looking for the 30-point game necessarily. Like if that happens, you're absolutely smashing. But yeah, we're not shooting for the moon here. We're just trying to get a different lineup construction than most people will have. And then the other one I mentioned a little bit earlier, Russell Wilson, I think will probably get some steam, but we currently have him projected under 5% ownership. He would be I don't want to completely throw up. You mentioned the passing attempts still weren't there for him last week necessarily, but we have seen him crush on efficiency in the past. That's been a thing. And they are actually playing at a much quicker pace than they were at the start of the season. So even though that hasn't necessarily translated to more passing attempts, it has been helpful in terms of overall play volume for their games.
I haven't checked the weather in Baltimore recently, but is there any kind of merit to like, hey, it's my last go here in Pittsburgh for Ben Roethlisberger against this Ravens defense, which really isn't. You're going to attack them through the air. I'm not overly excited about Ben Roethlisberger, but I mean he's 5.4, and no one's going to play him. Like, is there a 300-yard game left in Ben Roethlisberger's bag? He's among the guys I'm going to study at these cheaper price points, aside from Andy Dalton. Other names that you might take a peek at. I think if you have if like the Titans game turned into a higher scoring affair, there's some cheap guys on Houston that could stack up with Davis Mills to make a surprising stack that doesn't need that much, and you're really just playing it for the players that you can get around your Davis Mills stack. Mac Jones, I anticipate the Patriots will continue to try to run the ball and play that way, but he's 5.4. If you wanted to do a skinny Mac Jones stack for salary purposes, I would be more comfortable stacking one player than two with him. But I think that there's a possibility of some consolidated target every once in a while getting there in a huge, massive tournament for him. And you mentioned Dalton. So I think those are the guys that are cheap down here that are gross at quarterback.
It was ugly.
Not a lot of fun to talk about. Let's talk about running backs.
Honestly, this was one of the harder positions for me to figure out. Under 5%. Kamara is not quite there, but he would be the guy closest that I'm actually excited about playing. I do think, again, monitor Mark Ingram's status with him because it goes fairly overlooked. And if Ingram's out again, we're looking at probably close to 90% of the RB touches for Kamara.
Yeah. That sounds highly attractive compared to some of the guys that I think are worth taking a gamble on here if you're trying to mix in an interesting option. I don't think DeAndre Swift's going to play a lot this week. And they do have Craig Reynolds, which is a concern because they probably want to get him mixed in here. But I think Jamal Williams at 4.8 gives you the combination of a salary saver as well as the projections aren't going to have DeAndre Swift out, or I think he got 6 touches last week, right? He was out there quite a bit. I don't know that we're going to see a lot of him. I think that the way that they're talking about this guy, they're gearing him up for next year. And Williams is playing his old team, not going to be highly owned, potential goal line back, and can actually play in the passing game if they need him to. So that's a marginally appealing option in a massive field tournament if you're trying to just find one or two guys off the board to mix in. I would also say the same on the other side of that game for Patrick Taylor. Not a real good way to project who's going to carry the rock there for the Packers. They're saying they're going to play the starters. If that turns out to be not true, I don't know how much AJ Dillon's going to get. It could be Patrick Taylor for a good amount of this game, and he's only 4K. Anything else here at running back that you think has any prayer?
Not really, no. Again, I mean, it would all just be speculation in terms of playing time, and I think a lot of the time that's just not worth it to do that. Basically,
imagine Saquon Barkley being 6.1 at 2% owned, and I'm mentioning Jamal Williams. What is going on there with them? Give me a wide receiver.
So if you're doing the Russell Wilson thing, you can look at DK Metcalf once again. That's a little bit more appealing. If you're doing the Ben Roethlisberger thing, Deontay Johnson.
Yeah.
I do think Deontay Johnson's going to go pretty low owned this week, and he's a fairly decent option. Is it maybe finally Robbie Anderson week? Maybe potentially.
I don't even think he's going to play, to be honest with you. Like he's been He's been out of practice a
Knocked
bunch.
up, yeah.
I don't think you're going to get lucky enough to get Robbie Anderson. That might not be too bad over there. So sadly, I think people are going to play Jamar Chase. Don't play Jamar Chase, by the way. I don't even know if he's going to play.
He'll get he's got the rookie receiving record, but it's like, again, barely. It's nothing.
He's not getting it. He's not getting
like
any
12 yards.
records. He's not getting any records this week with Brandon Allen out there. God, imagine getting 50 DraftKings points and you're going to be 2% the next week. That's just the way it works out with the schedule this season. But yeah, once again, not a ton of just fabulous options down the board here. I think you mentioned the Rams. Like if you're going to stack Rams, I think Jefferson and Odell Beckham could be your, double stacking them with Stafford could be an interesting pivot off of trying to get Cooper Kupp jammed in there, or even going with the tight end Higbee. But I just think that that's an interesting way to look off the board to make your lineup just a little bit different. Is maybe fade your traditional Kupp stack, which is scary as hell. But if he doesn't score a touchdown for once, maybe you get lucky with the other guys. Okay.
So real quick, worth pointing out, which was actually pretty surprising, back when Odell Beckham was brought on to the Rams, every once in a while, he kind of, the first initial few games, he would split time with Ben Skoranek, his wide receiver 3. That was Van Jefferson last week. Odell was basically on the field for every snap. So interestingly, I don't know if maybe Van Jefferson goes back to a complete role this week, but I thought it was interesting that he was now splitting time with Skoranek, and it was Odell that was out there all the time. So yeah, fading Cooper Kupp is scary, but Odell would definitely be the guy that I do it with.
Hope we get some news here to really clean up this area of the world, because it's just it's not exciting. Tight end. Do you have anything at tight end, Tuttle? Because it's gross enough as it is. I think I might actually have one I'm interested in.
So I do think the move here is, if you're trying to get different, is you pay up. One of those guys we mentioned, if you assume Jimmy G plays, then Kittle's the guy that you pay out for. I think he's going to see low ownership. And then Gronk is low enough owned on DraftKings where I think he doesn't quite hit that 5% threshold. But he is. I do think if they'd go out and try to win this game, you could see him with a really strong first half at least.
A player that is going to score a touchdown this week, without a doubt, I've never been more sure of anything in my life, is Pat Freiermuth. That's a situation where if you're not brave enough to even play Big Ben, I think that if push comes to shove and they get into the red area of the field, he's, I'll use the analysis again. He's tall, and he's out there catching touchdowns at a pretty good clip with Ben. He's got that mojo with him, like he had with the other guy back in the day, Miller. So I see that happening out there. You think that the Ravens are good on defense? They're not. And Freiermuth is a guy at 4.6, not particularly cheap, but also this is a completely trash week at tight end. If he gets in the box twice, you're certainly going to be in business. Folks, that is going to do it for this final ownership report. And what a way to end it, by the way, Tuttle. Final ownership
terrible
report.
Show to do it.
In week 18 National Football League DFS. For Dan Gaspar, I'm Chris Gimino. We will be back again next season. Go win something.